how does a kid from Braintree end up in Iquitos? Can you just, you touched a little bit upon it, but.
Yeah, well, like I said, like the main thing that drove me to South America, and there were some personal things in my life going on as well that I don't really want to get into right now, but it was mainly to write. And in terms of being from Braintree and just being that's something that I actually struggle with a lot, because part of me is like I'm a writer living in Peru, like the expat writer, and writing about some pretty intense things. But there's another part of me that's like very kind of just regular, normal. I like watching the baseball game like anybody else does, or the basketball game. And my siblings live in Braintree, and I'm quite close with them. And whenever I come back and I spend time with them, and they have, I have several nieces and nephews, and I come back and it's like, wouldn't it be great just to have a house here and just do the normal thing? But there's another part of me that's just way too out there to do that. I'm interested in different things, and so that's something that I really, really struggle with. It's actually something that's really been painful for me throughout my life. It's like there's one part of me that's just like totally off the reservation, and another part of me is just whatever, just a regular guy that. So this is something that's been something that and I used to think, maybe I can work it out and integrate it, and it's just like you really can't. It's just like these are just radically different parts, and they're different, and it's really hard to integrate two things that are just so different.
Sure.
So it's just like I stay down there and I come home to visit, and that's what I can do right now.
Plant medicine.
Plant medicine.
So we've mentioned it, but what is it? Can plants truly heal? Is it a healing modality that is gaining a lot of traction? But for someone who doesn't know, what can you talk a bit about?
Yeah, so I think a good way to think about anything is this, the root of the word medicine is from the Latin medicina, and the etymology is like just a healing art. And when you think of medicine as an art, it kind of, as being like the actual root of the word, it changes a little bit how you think of what medicine is, because in particularly since after World War II, medicine in America has slowly become kind of a corporate scientific type of thing. It's a discourse.
Sure.
Where we don't think of medicine as having anything to do with it's almost like a form. It's formalized, right? So yes, I absolutely think plant medicine can heal, but plant medicine is a fad right now, right?
Right.
So I think we have to be careful about thinking it's like a magic bullet that's going to solve all your problems or something like that. I think like anything, plant medicine, if you engage with it and work with it, it can be very helpful to you. There's no doubt about that. And it can be healing. I'm skeptical of the idea of being healed. I believe you can heal. It's like a process.
Right.
But I definitely, we live in a culture right now that's like very instant gratification. We want to be fixed. We want to be healed. And this is not something, this type of attitude is foreign to vegetative life. Vegetative life is something that's immersed in a process.
Right.
It's not something that happened. It's a living process. And this is in diametrical opposition to the ideology of, consumer society, which is something that wants something to be fixed. It wants it now. It wants to be optimized and streamlined, and all of these words that we're indoctrinated with these days. So I do think plant medicine can be helpful. I do think it can be very helpful in the process of healing. And I also think, and another thing is, a lot of the medicines that are used right now, and these are like medicines you find at CVS, a lot of these have plant-based anyways.
Sure.
They're derived in their initial incarnation from some kind of quote-unquote plant medicine, some kind of vegetative life. And then they've been modified as time went on with different synthetic and pharmacological interventions. So most every medicine is connected to the natural world in some capacity.
Right.
So I think we had this distinction that I do think it's true that like a plant-based derivative that you could buy at a pharmacy in America is different than just a plant that's prepared in the Amazon jungle. But there's also a similarity there that we're not seeing. It's being obfuscated through the processes of technology and capitalism. Yeah.
And for those who don't know,
Yeah.
these, many of these plants that have medicinal qualities, they're not psychoactive, correct?
Yeah, of course, the most obvious psychoactive plant medicine of the Amazon jungle is ayahuasca. But ayahuasca is an anomaly in many ways, and that's why it's so fascinating to people from the West, and it's fascinating to people in Peru too. I mean, it's a very mysterious plant or admixture. It's a combination of two different plants, and that mystery, I should mention, is in the process of being lost, because like anything that becomes commodified and becomes put into the circuitry of equivalence and exchange, it starts to lose its mystery. It starts to lose its magic, you could say. I don't know what word we could use to describe that. But ayahuasca, yeah, so a lot of the other plants that are used in the Amazon, they're not psychoactive at all in the sense of ayahuasca, in the sense they're psychoactive, causing some kind of psychedelic experience. There are many, one of the famous markets in Iquitos is called Belen Market, and there's an alley, a famous alley in the market called Shaman's Alley. It's it's one of the most amazing places on planet Earth. It's just incredible. And you walk down the alley, and there's probably maybe 50 or 60 booths, maybe 30 on each side, and there are all these, and they're selling all types of plants and tinctures and everything from all these different trees and barks of trees and everything else that have been from the jungle. And what's also interesting is all the people that work in the alley, they're not shamans. Most everyone are women, older women that have a lot of knowledge about different plants and what they can do and how they can heal. And yeah, you could probably buy ayahuasca in Shaman's Alley, but you could buy 200 more plants, that have nothing to do with any type of psychedelic experience. But ayahuasca, and you mentioned one of the books I've written is called the Ayahuasca Dialogues. So I've done a lot of reading and research and experience. I've drank ayahuasca many, many times myself. And ayahuasca is without question an anomaly. It's how did it come about? No one really knows. The shaman that I co-wrote the book with, his name's Ricardo Amaringo. He's a very well-known shaman in the Amazon. Very, very talented, unbelievably talented actually. And one of the questions I asked in the book is, where did ayahuasca come from? And he said, I tell you, but you don't want to know the answer, or something like that. Meaning like you white people don't want to know. And basically, he said a long time ago, he's from the Shipibo tribe. He said the first Shipibo man had a dream, and the spirit said, go out to the jungle and get this tree and that leaf, boil them together, and there you'll have your medicine. And and the point he was making is that people who are, let's say people like us, white people, or people from a country like America, we want to know like the scientific root of we want to know the exact scientific chemical composition. We want to know the anthropological root. We want to know things. And he's just like, this isn't how it works down here. Sure. How it works down here is someone had a dream and a spirit told them. That's how it works down here. In your world, it works like that, but I want nothing to do with that, And that's why he prefaced it. I tell you, but you don't want to know. Right. And I thought that was great,
Well, because it's a brew essentially. That's a concoction of two different. Sure. Plants?
Yeah, it's a tree. It's a vine of a tree. It's just called the copy vine, and it's actually the vine is colloquially known as ayahuasca, and then you have leaves called the chacuna leaves, and they're essentially mixed together. And what it does is the chacuna leaves contain within them a psychoactive compound called DMT, which is responsible for giving the visions.
Sure.
And then the copy vine has what's called an MAO inhibitor. And what that does is it essentially allows the DMT to come into the brain. Mm-hmm. So one without the other doesn't really work. DMT can work if you smoke it or inject it, but if you take it in your mouth, it's not orally active. It needs the ayahuasca to make it orally active. So the two of them together produce the psychedelic experience that we know as ayahuasca.
Right.
Yeah.
And so the mystery would be who the heck combined these two?
Sure. I mean, and that is a mystery.
Right.
I mean, how did that come to be? And how is it possible that drinking a little cup of this medicine can do what it does to you experientially? How can you have this wide array of visions, this incredible depth of perception, this kind of eruption of feeling and emotion, this incredible this an insight into the world and your history and your family and nature and all this
Sure.
stuff. How can this happen? Because, you know, what's happening in ayahuasca, I don't think, you know, and of course, because it's becoming more, I guess you could say, popular in a place like America, it's starting to come under the gaze of science. Like, what neural mechanisms are happening to the brain, and what part of the brain is being activated, and, you know, what's the actual chemical composition of this stuff. And I think for me, I'm interested in that a little bit, but at the same time, I'm more interested in the way a shaman in the Amazon would talk about it, in the sense that they're interested in the experience of it, they're interested in how it can help another human being heal, and they're also interested in it as a part of their heritage, you could say, you know, how something like ayahuasca is part and parcel to a culture and to art. We were talking about the visionary art that's a unique mode of artistic representation of Iquitos. And I'm less interested in like the chemical composition of DMT. You know, I mean, I'm interested in it, but I'm less interested in that. Yeah.
And you've mentioned the term a couple times, shamanism. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Sure, shaman. Well, a shaman is a healer, we'd say, and there are shamans in, you know, when the first when the Pilgrims came to Plymouth in 1620, and they came in contact with the Wampanoags, there were shamans, I'm imagining, amongst them. I don't think was Squanto a shaman or Samoset, these first guys at the Plymouth. I don't really remember, but I'm imagining that but the point is that shamanism is a universal feature of human life, and you'll find shamans in Siberia, you'll find them in Australia, you certainly will find them in the North American indigenous tradition, and you'll find them in South America throughout the upper Peruvian Amazon. And a shaman is a healer, and they have a unique, and you know, their healing modality differs from tribe to tribe, and it just so happens that in many of the tribes of the upper Peruvian Amazon, ayahuasca plays a central role in the healing experience. Yeah.
And you mentioned that it's a fad right now, or it's a buzz word for sure.
Yeah.
And do you see that as being dangerous in any way, or the commercialization of ayahuasca?
Well, like anything, it has its good points and bad points. I mean, I definitely think that people drinking ayahuasca is a good thing, because I think ayahuasca can be very helpful for people. But then, of course, there's some bad aspects of it too. I mean, one of the bad aspects is the depletion of the two ingredients of ayahuasca, you know, which is happening right now in the Amazon, where you have to go. Whereas, you know, I've talked to people down in the Iquitos, and, you know, 20 years ago, there was tons of ayahuasca just basically 5 miles from Iquitos. Now, if you want ayahuasca now, you got to go a days down the river. And I'm imagining in 20 years from now, you have to go 5 days down the river. So there's definitely a depletion of the vine. And then also, too, if you're drinking, I have a friend that lives in Shanghai, and she was telling me how it's very popular amongst the kind of the Shanghai elite right now. And Shanghai is a major global city with tremendous amount of money and cultural power. And, you know, a lot of the artists and investment bankers and whoever are drinking ayahuasca right now. And this is very interesting to me. It's like you're drinking ayahuasca in a 40-story luxury condominium. That's very different from drinking ayahuasca in a Maloka in the Amazon jungle. It's a very, very different thing. And, you know, I said to her, well, who's serving the medicine? And she said, oh, somebody went to, you know, whatever, Brazil or Iquitos, and they drank ayahuasca a few times and brought some back, and they're serving it. I mean, that's dangerous. Right. It's dangerous in the sense that to become an ayahuasquero or an ayahuasca shaman, this is a very unique type of person that's going to do this. Right. This is not your everyday. This is not like I'm going to become a therapist. Sure. This is like a totally different ball of wax. And there's a certain psychic energy that you have to be able to handle, not only in other people, but yourself as well. Right. You know, because there's a lot that can happen in an ayahuasca ceremony. That's the understatement of the year. Right, you know,